Have you ever tried to plan your chapters and you felt your whole body tighten? You sit down with good intentions, you tell yourself, right, I'm going to map out this book properly. And before you know it, you're either staring at a blank table with absolutely no idea what goes where, or you've created such a detailed outline that the story already feels trapped before you've written a word. That's what we're talking about today, because chapter planning is meant to support your writing, not suffocate it. It's meant to give you enough direction that you know where you're heading without turning your manuscript into a rigid little prison cell. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to build a flexible chapter roadmap that gives your book direction, keeps your creativity alive, and helps you move forward without boxing you in. So stay with me. If you feel called to write a book, but writer's block, procrastination, and self-doubt keep pulling you from the page, you're not alone, and you're not meant to stay stuck. Hi, I'm Maddison, author and life coach, and I've created this podcast as a creative space grounded in faith and mindset transformations to help you break through your blocks, gain creative clarity, and finally finish the book you're meant to write. So grab your cup of liquid gold and let's write the darn book together. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Write the Darn Book. I'm your host, Maddison, and in today's Writing Wednesday episode, we are diving into the craft of writing and we're talking about structure. But structure is never just structure. Planning your chapters isn't just about putting headings into a document and hoping your future self obeys them. It's about self-trust, it's about creative wiring, and it is about giving your manuscript enough support that you can actually keep moving forward with your book without forcing yourself into a process that makes you want to run from the page. Today we're talking about how to build a chapter roadmap without boxing yourself in. And I want to say this up front, especially for my owls and peacocks listening. Owls, you might love the idea of a chapter roadmap because your nervous system often feels safer when there's a plan in place. But you can also get stuck trying to make the plan perfect before you write a word. And peacocks, you might resist the idea of a chapter roadmap because you don't want the joy and surprise taken out of your writing. But without enough structure, and that can be just a little bit, you might end up with 10 brilliant beginnings, but no finished book. So today's episode is about finding the middle path and really what path is going to suit you individually depending on your unique wiring. I want to give you enough structure to support you, but enough freedom to keep the story alive on the page. Now let's begin with why chapter planning can feel so different from writer to writer. For one writer, a chapter roadmap can feel like relief. You can finally feel as if you can breathe because your book has shape, you know what comes next, and you know where the emotional movement or the characters are heading. The document stops feeling like this giant foggy mountain and it starts to feel like a series of manageable steps. For another writer, though, the exact same process can feel like creative suffocation. The moment that you plan too much, the spark disappears. You start thinking, well, now I know what happens, so why would I write it? Or you look at your outline and you feel this heavy internal resistance because a part of you feels controlled even before you've begun to write. Now, neither of those responses are wrong. They're simply information. And this is where your writing personality and your creative wiring matter so much. Some writers need more of a map, but some writers need more movement and freedom to explore the story. Some writers need that clear destination, but they need room to discover the path to get there. And some writers need to see the emotional shape first before any chapter structure makes sense. The mistake is assuming that there is one correct amount of planning or one way to actually plan your book. There isn't. The real question isn't, should I outline or should I write by the seat of my pants? The better question is, what level of structure is going to help me to keep writing? Because that's the point. The point of a chapter roadmap isn't to prove that you're organised, and it's not to impress your inner critic. It's also not to create a document that's so detailed that it becomes a substitute for the manuscript. The point of a chapter roadmap is to help you open your manuscript tomorrow and know the next useful step. That's it. And if your roadmap does that, then it is working. If, on the other hand, it makes you avoid your book, or you overthink every scene, or you feel like you've already failed because the book is changing, then the roadmap's no longer serving you. It's become another form of resistance. And my friends, writers can turn anything into resistance if we're unsure enough. Research can become resistance. Planning can become resistance. Rewriting can too. Even learning about writing and taking course after course can become a form of resistance if it keeps you so busy while the actual book itself and your writing of it remains untouched. So today we're going to build a chapter roadmap that does what structure is meant to do. It holds the book gently. It doesn't grip it by the throat. I want to take you back to something that I've seen time and time again, both in my own writing life and with the writers I'm coaching. A writer comes to the page with a book they genuinely care about. They have the idea, probably even the characters and the themes of the story. They've researched or they've got notes. They've perhaps even got a folder full of ideas and fragments for the book. There's no lack of passion. But when they try to turn that into chapters, everything suddenly feels so much bigger. The book stops being this living thing inside of them and it starts looking like a huge construction project. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, and so on, until suddenly every choice feels like it matters way too much. And this is often the moment that the inner critic walks in wearing a high-vis vest and carrying a clipboard, and it says, "Are you sure that this belongs here?" And you say, "Oh, gosh, I don't know. Shouldn't I know the whole structure by now? Shouldn't you know the whole structure by now?" And the critic says, "Well, what if this is in the wrong order? What if I should move this here? What if we write and there's too much to revise after?" So instead of writing, the writer in you starts to try to solve the entire book at once. That can be very exhausting, and it's also unnecessary. When I'm working with a manuscript, I don't think a chapter roadmap needs to answer every question before the writing begins. In fact, if you try to make it answer every question, then you can accidentally remove the very thing that writing needs most, which is discovery. Because writing isn't just transcribing a plan. Writing is listening. Like I always say, you are the vessel for your story and the words flow through you onto the page. And sometimes that is done and the story reveals itself as you write it, not before. But that doesn't mean that we throw structure completely out the window. This is where writers often swing too far in either direction. They either try to control everything before they begin, or they refuse to plan at all and then wonder why they lose momentum in the middle. But there is a powerful space between those two extremes, and that space is flexible structure. A chapter roadmap isn't a cage, it's a walking trap. It's a guide for you. It tells you where the next marker is, helps you keep your bearings, and it stops you from wandering around in circles. But it still allows the weather to change, and it allows you to notice something beautiful on the side of the path. It still allows the story to breathe. And that's the kind of roadmap I want you to build. Not a rigid outline that demands obedience, but a living, breathing map that helps keep you and your writing moving. So let's talk about how to actually build one. And I want you to think of your chapter roadmap as having 3 layers. The first layer is direction, the second layer is movement, and the third layer is flexibility. That's all we're working with today. 3 layers, because anything more becomes too much to hold in your mind while you're listening. Let's start first with direction. Now, direction means that you know what this chapter is roughly doing in the larger book. For a fiction chapter, that might mean the character discovers something or avoids something, chooses something, perhaps they lose something or move closer to a truth that they don't want to face. For a non-fiction chapter, that might mean the reader understands a concept, questions an old belief, learns a new tool, or sees themselves more clearly to take practical next steps. Notice I'm not starting with plot mechanics, and I'm not asking you to write a perfect chapter summary. I'm asking, what is this chapter here to do? That question is so beautifully clarifying, because a chapter isn't just a container for events or for information. A chapter needs a reason to exist. It needs a job. And when you know the job of the chapter, you have direction without needing to control every single sentence. So for each chapter in your roadmap, begin with the simple sentence, this chapter exists to ... and fill that in. And that's it. Perhaps it's this chapter exists to reveal the protagonist's fear. This chapter exists to force the couple into close proximity. It could be this chapter exists to show the reader why their current writing process is failing them. That gives you a compass. Now let's move to the second layer, which is movement. Movement is what changes from the beginning of the chapter to the end of it. So this is where a lot of chapter plans fall flat, because they describe what happens, but they don't identify what shifts. And a chapter without a shift often feels static, even if there are lots of words on the page. In fiction, the shift might be emotional, relational, informational, or perhaps even situational. The character moves from certainty to doubt, or from distance to attraction, from safety to threat, or perhaps from denial to recognition. In non-fiction, the shift might be that the reader's understanding or self-perception shifts. They might move from confusion to clarity, from shame to recognition, or perhaps from overwhelm to one clear next step. And this matters because readers keep reading because something is changing. Now, that doesn't mean things have to be exploding on the page or dramatic every single paragraph, but changing. So after you write, this chapter exists to ... ask yourself, what changes by the end? Again, keep it simple. Perhaps by the end of this chapter, she realizes the person she distrusts might be the only one telling her the truth. Or it could be by the end of this chapter, the reader understands that procrastination isn't laziness, but a protective pattern. That one sentence gives your chapter energy. And now we come to the third layer, which is flexibility. And this is the part that most writers miss. A good roadmap must leave room for the book to teach you something. So instead of locking every chapter into a rigid list of scenes, I want you to build what I call open space into your roadmap. Open space means that you leave room for discovery. You identify the purpose and the shift in the chapter, but you don't force yourself to know every single thing that happens in that chapter before you write. For example, instead of writing, Chapter 7 must include a confrontation in the library, the discovery of the missing letter, 3 pages of dialogue, and a final line where she storms out. Instead, you might write, Chapter 7 exists to increase mistrust between the heroine and the hero. By the end, she believes he's hidden something important from her, and possible ingredients I might include are the library, a missing letter, and confrontation. Do you feel the difference? The second version gives you direction, but it also gives you breathing room to actually explore that scene. It lets your creative mind participate. And for peacocks especially, this can make structure feel far less suffocating because the roadmap isn't stealing the surprise. It's simply giving the surprise somewhere to land, and then you can discover what that surprise is when you start writing on the page. Now for owls, this kind of roadmap can feel a little loose at first, so you might want a little more certainty, and that's absolutely fine. You can add more detail if detail genuinely helps you write the scene. But watch the line between what's useful preparation and that perfectionistic type of delay to get things perfect before you start writing. And I know this from experience, my friends, right? Being an owl predominant writer. But look, if your chapter roadmap helps you to begin, it's useful. If it keeps you endlessly refining the map, then it's become avoidance, and it's not actually helping you, it's hindering you. So you need to be very aware of what's actually happening. Now for eagles, the roadmap can help you slow down enough to make sure the emotional beats are actually landing and you're not just racing towards that finish line. For doves, the roadmap can give you a sense of safety, especially if you frame each chapter around the emotional truth and the connection of the characters rather than having to perform when you write. So let me give you a practical method. For each chapter, you create 4 simple fields. Chapter number, or the working title for the chapter, and this chapter exists to ... By the end, what has shifted? ? And answer that. And then what are the possible ingredients? And just jot down a few points. That's it. That is enough to begin. The possible ingredients section is important because it gives your mind options rather than instructions. And for some of you, you might not even want to include this, but it can help to actually trigger your imagination. You could include a scene idea, a question, a reveal, a conversation, a memory, or perhaps an image, but you're not promising that all of those ingredients are going to appear in the chapter. You're simply placing them on the bench, and you can grab them if you want to substitute them into the game. So when you cook, for example, you don't always use every ingredient you put out. And writing can work the same way. And it's the same principle with your chapter. You don't have to use everything. But what you do want is that direction, movement, and flexibility. That's the whole rhythm. And here's the part I really want you to hear. You don't need to roadmap the entire book before you write it. For some writers, especially owls, a full roadmap might feel really wonderful. And if that's you, that's brilliant. Absolutely build the whole chapter roadmap, but keep it flexible. But for other writers, especially peacocks and kinesthetic writers, mapping out the entire book can feel like you are stifling the story before it's even had a chance to breathe. And it's not that you can't understand structure. Of course, you absolutely can. It's just that too much structure can soon make the writing feel controlled or like you're being boxed in. And when that happens, the creative spark can go flat, the body can resist, and the mind can start looking for the next exciting idea instead of staying with the manuscript in front of you. So if that is you, I don't want you forcing yourself to map all 30 or 40 chapters before you're actually allowed to write. Map the next 3. Just 3. And that's going to give you enough direction to keep moving without making your creative self feel trapped inside a plan that it never agreed to. And this is where your roadmap becomes a momentum tool rather than a planning trap. Every time you finish a chapter, you revisit the roadmap. You adjust what changed and you map out the next chapter or the next 3 chapters. You let the manuscript stay alive. That's how you avoid boxing yourself in. You stop treating the roadmap as a commandment and you start treating it as a conversation. The book says, here's what I'm becoming, and you say, all right, let's adjust the map. That's not failure. That is writing. So if your manuscript changes, that doesn't mean your plan was wrong. It means your understanding of your story and your characters has deepened. If your character refuses to do what you expected, that doesn't mean you've lost control. It might just mean the character has become more real. If your non-fiction argument shifts as you write, that doesn't mean your chapter plans failed. It just means you're discovering the clearest path for your readers. The roadmap is there to serve your book, and your book is not there to serve the roadmap. Now, before we move into today's practical exercise, I want to name one more thing. Sometimes writers avoid chapter roadmaps because they're afraid that if they create one, they'll have to follow it perfectly. But you absolutely don't. You are allowed to change the map. You're allowed to rewrite the chapter purpose and what it's all about. You can move chapter 7 to chapter 12. You are allowed to realize that 3 chapters should actually be 1 chapter, or perhaps 1 chapter needs to become 3. That's not messy. That is manuscript development. The only thing I don't want you doing is using flexibility as a reason to never commit to the next step. Flexibility doesn't mean vague, it means responsive. So your roadmap should always answer one very practical question. What am I writing next? If it answers that, it's doing its job. Now let's make this useful for you today. I want you to map your next 3 chapters. Only 3. Whether you're at the beginning, in the middle, perhaps revising or restarting, or trying to return to a manuscript after time away, 3 chapters to map out is enough. And for each chapter, write these 4 things. First, the chapter number or working title. Second, this chapter exists to, and ... fill in that question. Third, by the end of this chapter, what's shifted? And fourth, possible ingredients I'm going to use in the chapter. Now, here is the extra piece I want you to add too, because this is what keeps the roadmap connected to the heart of your book. For each of those 3 chapters, name the emotional shift. Not just what happens and not just what information is delivered, but what's the emotional shift for your characters. So that could be what changes inside them, or if you're writing non-fiction, what changes inside the reader after reading that chapter. Then ask yourself, where are they emotionally at the start of the chapter? Where do they get to emotionally at the end? So what movement bridges that gap between the start and the end? That's how your roadmap becomes more than a structural tool. It becomes a story tool. It becomes a reader experience tool and a way of making sure that the book is moving, not just filling pages. So your exercise for today is simple. Map out those 3 chapters. Name the purpose, name the shift, leave room for discovery. And then write the next chapter. Not the whole book and not the perfect outline, just the next chapter. And that is how books get finished. One clear next step at a time. And if today's episode has landed for you, especially if you know your manuscript needs more structure, but you're scared that structure will kill the creative flow, then this is exactly the kind of work I do with writers inside my coaching. Because everything we've talked about today, you can absolutely begin applying on your own. But sometimes what you really need is someone to help you see the shape of your book from the outside, help you identify where the structure is too loose or too tight, and to build a writing roadmap that actually fits the way you uniquely create. That's what my free 15-minute clarity call is for. It's a mutual fit conversation, not a coaching session and not a pushy sales call, just a chance for both of us to explore where you are with your book, what's getting in the way, and whether my coaching is going to be the right next step for you. So if you're ready to stop circling your manuscript and start building a path to the finish line, head to madisonmichaels.com/call and book in your free clarity call. Your book doesn't need a perfect plan before you begin, but it does need a path. And sometimes that path is much closer than you think. So my friend, as you head back to your manuscript today, I want you to remember this. Structure isn't the enemy of creativity. Control is. A chapter roadmap isn't there to box you in. It is there to help you hear the story more clearly, to trust the next step, and to keep moving when the manuscript starts to feel too big. So give yourself enough structure to feel supported, but enough freedom to stay connected to your words. And most importantly, keep writing. Remember, you are the vessel for your story. So let the words flow through you and onto the page. Until next time, my friends, please take care and let's write the done book together. My friend, I hope today's episode gave you exactly what you needed for your writing journey. And if it did, would you take 30 seconds to share it with another writer who's struggling to start or finish their book? And if you're loving the show, I'd be so grateful if you left a quick review. It means the world to me and truly makes my day to know that this podcast is helping you. And as you head back into your week, I hope you feel more supported and connected to your creativity. And remember, you're a vessel for the story. So let the words flow through you and onto the page. All right, I'm off to refill my cup of liquid gold and go and do a little writing of my own. Take care, and I'll meet you back here in the next episode of Write the Darn Book.